In other news, Prime Minister Dr. Kenny Anthony is in Kingston, Jamaica, where a summit will be held between the United States and CARICOM. During the official visit of the President of the U.S., Barack Obama, to Jamaica on the 9th of April, a meeting will be held between the President and heads of state and government of CARICOM to discuss issues such as competitiveness, prosperity, renewable energy, security, and other matters of mutual interest. After the CARICOM summit in Jamaica, Prime Minister Anthony will travel to Panama City, Panama, for the 70th meeting of the Americas to be held on April 10 to the 11th. The heads of state and government of the Americas will address the summit, which has the central theme, Prosperity with Equity, the Challenge of Cooperation in the Americas, within which will be discussed several sub-themes, among them education, health, energy, environment, migration, security, citizen participation, and democratic governance. The summit, which occurs every 3 years, offers the opportunity for countries to jointly define a hemispheric agenda at the highest level to address urgent challenges and propel positive change. Prime Minister Anthony is expected to return to St. Lucia on Monday, 13th April. And Barack Obama is the first U.S. president to set foot on Jamaican soil in more than 3 decades since Ronald Reagan in 1982. It comes as the United States bids to check Venezuelan influence in the Caribbean. Obama will be keen to offer an alternative to cheap Venezuelan oil, which has enticed many of the region's struggling economies, but looks set to end. The president will have to woo countries that, while geographically close to the U.S., sometimes feel politically distant. If the U.S. has not always made its presence fully felt in the Caribbean, that vacuum was filled by PetroCaribe. The program offered to Caribbean and some Central American nations the opportunity to defer payment for oil under low interest rates. But as Venezuela's own economy has faltered as oil prices slide, the Caribbean states have faced stricter terms and shorter supplies, leaving them vulnerable. Venezuela has been reducing its subsidized oil exports to PetroCaribe and the smaller states that receive those subsidies, including Cuba. Well, Caribbean leaders in January gathered in Washington for the initial Caribbean Power Security Summit hosted by U.S. Vice President Joe Biden. Prime Minister Dr. Kenny Anthony was among the regional leaders in attendance. The U.S. Vice President told the heads of government that the IMF has projected that America will experience economic growth at over 3% in the next year. Consequently, there will be more money for investment, especially in the Caribbean.
Economy squeezed by the high cost, making companies less competitive, crowding out other investments in the future of your countries. Citizens in your countries demanding more affordable supply, expressing their discontent when they hear about investments they don't seem to see any results in. Governments dependent on single, increasingly unreliable external suppliers, not just here, but in Europe and other parts of the world as well. And whether it's the Ukraine or the Caribbean, no country should be able to use natural resources as a tool of coercion against any other country. Energy developers come to your door with exciting ideas, but somehow deals fall apart when it comes to finding the financing. Many of you feel you can't tolerate the rise in energy prices, giving the little space you have to make reforms that you need to make. But this is an opportunity. That's been the story, but it doesn't need to remain that way. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to energy, we're living in a new moment, not just in the Caribbean, but worldwide.
Joe Biden forecasted that the low oil prices would sustain for a few years. As such, the time is now for the Caribbean to be exploring strategies to help nations convert diesel-powered energy plants to organic gas and increase use of other alternative energy sources.
The cost of developing wind and solar energy has fallen by 50%. 50% just in the last 4 years. We're starting to see those technologies outcompete real coal, oil-fired generation in places like Brazil without any subsidies at all. We have technologies in natural gas that are moving forward. And we shouldn't expect this to be a panacea for everyone, but it's also true there are more options at your disposal now for natural gas delivery than there have ever been, from small-scale barge trades of LNG to floating import terminals. And they're not just, these aren't just designs on paper. They exist. They operate. You can now purchase gas on the open market from many countries, including your neighbor, Trinidad Tobago, right now. There is also LNG exporters in the United States with licenses to export to any of your countries, whether you have a free trade agreement or not. If you want gas, go talk to them. Meanwhile, we're in the midst of a seismic shift in the global economy. The ascendancy of the Americas as the epicenter of energy production in the world. We have more oil and gas rigs running in the United States than all the rest of the world combined. Mexico, Canada, and the United States is the new epicenter of energy, not the Arabian Peninsula.
The U.S. Vice President said it was in America's self-interest that the Caribbean succeeds as prosperous, energy-independent neighbors, not a world apart, but an integral part of the hemisphere. Stay with the CTV News. When we come back, an outstanding St. Lucian folk musician and cultural activist dies.